Okay, so from a business perspective, there are lots of different types of conflicts that we have to deal with. In particular, there are three types of conflicts that are common in organization: task conflict, relationship conflict, and value conflict. Although open communication, collaboration, and respect will go a long way towards conflict management, the three types of conflict can also benefit from a targeted conflict resolution tactic. The idea basically here is don't be afraid of conflict. Conflict is it's normal, it's natural, it's part of the process. When you got people who care a lot about a particular anything that we're doing, chances are people are going to have different opinions, which is not a bad thing. However, it leads to conflict, which is not necessarily a bad thing, provided we manage the conflict. Now, if we look a little bit deeper, conflict can also be data, which is task related. It could be interest, which is value related. It could be value itself, which is what we call a value conflict. It could be structural, which is relationship conflict. And from a relationship perspective, it can really get out of hand if we don't do something to try and solve it. Can we fix all conflicts? The answer is no. Should we try to fix all conflicts? The answer is maybe. It really depends on the situation. However, should we be proactive or reactive? My approach here would be to be proactive. When it comes to data or task conflict, there's no reason why task conflict should continue. For example, let's say you are a manager or leader and you're working with a group of people, your team. Now, if your team doesn't know what they're doing, what is your responsibility here? Well, to explain it. You've explained it, they still don't understand, show them. If you've explained it and showed them and they still don't understand, train them. If these three options fail, then have a meeting to discuss why is it still failing. Maybe the goal that we set or the task that we've allocated is beyond their current ability. In which case, it's our responsibility to help them to get over this conflict. When we look at interest or value conflict, right? Here, different people might be interested in different things or might have different values. So even though we're working on a particular project, people might be pushing it towards different directions. Here, the best resolution would be, let's all sit down, put our cards on the table and discuss it. Make sure we're on the same page. Quite often, our goal might be the same, our objective might be the same, we just have different approaches to it. So it becomes really important to ensure that everyone is now on the same page going, okay, we all agree this is what we need to do. The how do we do it part, that's where we currently have a conflict. So let's discuss that part in focus. And when we discuss that part in focus, let's look at everyone's ideas and see what we can incorporate. Maybe half of an idea here and a half of an idea here can come together and something great can be done from it. And lastly, the relationship side, which we've already discussed in brief. Relationships can be complicated, especially in the work environment. When you've got very strong personalities that are constantly clashing, it does not set a very good team setting or team environment. So it becomes really important here to think about structure, right? What is our current structure? Who has authority over what particular task? In a team orientated where more people are considered to be equal, well, what is the process that we can use to get through this conflict? Sometimes you may never be able to resolve a relationship conflict adequately. It just might not be possible. But we still have to try to get it to the point where we can still meet our overall goal. And that's what it's all about when it comes to conflict resolution within an organization. For me, I would have to be honest, like I've faced a lot of different conflicts, mostly due to differing professional opinions. For example, one person believes this is the right way to do something. I might believe, no, there's actually a different way of doing it. Am I good with dealing with conflict? The answer is no, not always. Mostly because if you feel really strongly about something, it can be quite difficult and quite challenging to articulate it in a manner which I guess, allows for a resolution to be built. And this is exactly where having a mediator becomes really, really important. And mediation, right? So when we get into an area where conflict cannot be resolved by two individuals or even by groups of people, you get a mediator. A mediator, by definition, is someone who you trust, but is also neutral. So they don't have a particular stake in the overall outcome. For them, it's about ensuring that the two warring parties or the two parties with disagreements or with conflict can come to a resolution. And that's something that I think is really, really important to have as well. If you want to get better at conflict resolution, I think looking at things like debating becomes really important. But you have to look at it from a humanistic perspective, meaning at the end of the day, the person that's standing across the room from you or across the table or just opposite to you with a differing opinion, they're not a bad person. They just have a different opinion to yourself. So when you look at debating and you get, say, an unbiased panel or unbiased person like a mediator to sit down and say, okay, let's look at the pros and cons. You might be able to convert this into a brainstorming session where you go, all right, so here is the problem that we're trying to solve. Here are the different approaches. Let's go through the pros and cons of the different approaches. And then as an organization, you might sit down and say, okay, as a business, what's our mission, what's our vision, and what's our value system? And you could use these three to then filter the ideas into pros and cons and work out, well, which is the best way forward. The difficult thing when it comes to dealing with conflict is when you have power imbalance. For example, if you're very powerful and the person you are conflicting with is not very powerful, then it becomes quite easy to get your way. And vice versa is also true. If you don't have much power and the other person does, it becomes quite difficult to get your way. I think the adult thing to do, the grown-up thing to do, or the smart thing to do is not flex your power to get your way, but instead dive into the actual topic being discussed, break it down to small pieces, compare it to the values that you want to uphold, and then make a decision. There are a lot of businesses that face a very interesting challenge. The challenge is quite a simple one. Profitability versus sustainability, right? Make lots of money or do something in a sustainable manner. And these things normally tend to be very conflicting with each other. So here one has to sit down and think, if we make a decision today, will this decision still be right tomorrow? Now, if your business from a value perspective says sustainability is important to us, then it becomes really easy to solve this particular conflict. You say, well, if the decision that we make today is not going to make sense tomorrow or the day after or a year from now, then maybe we shouldn't make that decision. Another thing to consider about conflict is situation. A decision that is correct today may not necessarily be the correct decision tomorrow. So whenever you sit down in these situations and go, okay, we've got differing perspectives, a good thing to do is ask for the rationale. The rationale is the why. If you believe so strongly in what you do, why do you believe in it? Right? Back it up with the actual thought itself so that people from another perspective who don't understand what you're saying can look at your thinking behind it. And maybe in time that might help them to understand the decisions that are being made. So conflict, it's not good, it's not bad, but it can help make us better. So that's an important thing to consider. Is conflict scary for people like me? Yes, I think conflict is scary, even though I get into conflicts all the time. In saying that, if you can move past it, and if you can set the right processes, have robust policies, you can have the right procedures, it can really help you to create better ways of doing things. And that's what makes it really powerful and important, as in conflict resolution.